It's the Political Free Agents podcast, and we're back for our Wednesday episode. What's going on, fellas? We got the pleasure of Mike on camera.
We're in one room today, baby. How about that?
It's the only way you're gonna get me on camera, I
guess. We had to do it some way.
I know, man. I know he was being incognito, brother. We got him now.
All of our listeners were sitting there like, man, Mike sounds sexy.
Yeah,
I be able to see that.
I know it. People don't.
No, my girl's listening right now.
Oh God, see this
guy.
See,
man. There you go. I bet she would agree.
You know what, man? I'm excited. It's going to be a good episode today. Things have been going well. I know. As far as the job labor front goes, man, I was fortunate today. I got to actually get out in the field and get out to one of the pipeline stations in Mont Belvieu, which is directly across from Enterprise Mont Belvieu, which is one of the largest gas plants in the world. And it is buzzing out there right now, man. So it's good to see. It's good to see Americans back at work. One of the things that I've talked to in regards to this quote unquote new normal in regards to the coronavirus is, practice social distancing, wear a mask. But, in the oil and gas industry, man, life must go on. And it's good to see, because you look at some of the other industries, especially industries that are people industries, waiters, barbers, nail hair salons, things like that. Individuals have tried to figure out how to function in those things, John. And if we're any indicator, for anyone listening, the one thing I'll tell you is just use your common sense, because that's exactly what it's going to take.
Absolutely. And I actually saw two different stores right across the street from each other, two little gas stations. They're actually now starting to require masks. One of them, they asked me hey, you got a mask? And you go, and of course they sell them.
Yeah.
But I just found it interesting because this entire time they didn't require masks, but now they actually are like, well, one of them says you have to, the other one is like, please oblige sort of thing. But it was pretty interesting. But to that point, yeah, be safe out there, folks.
And it is what it is. Like I said, if this is going to be the quote unquote new normal, man, it is what it is. We just have to, we just got to do what we got to do. And at the end of the day, life is certainly not going to stop. We need to be better as, Americans, and not quote unquote be so selfish. I think I was one of the ones running around without a mask at the beginning. I know Mike was. I don't think I took it as seriously as I probably should have. And when you look at the statistics and things like that, we probably could have gotten rid of this a lot faster had we just exercised a little bit of common sense.
Oh no, I still hold the view that this thing's not going to go away. So you're probably going to get exposed to it eventually.
Well, there's that too. Absolutely.
Granted, that doesn't mean that you should be reckless and not take precautions, but at the same time, I think really the big problem is this country is so based around the idea of you can't tell me what to do.
Right.
That once you start making things like mandatory, Americans start kind of freaking out. You know what I mean? So, but the libertarian view essentially is, if it's a private business and they want to require you to wear a mask to go in, then that's their choice.
Yeah.
Abide by the rules or don't come in. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of a tough pill to swallow at first, just because it's kind of inconvenient to a lot of people. You know what I mean? You got to carry a mask around everywhere with you now and everything. But I think eventually people will understand that if a place is going to require you of their own choosing to make you wear a mask to come into their place of business, then just follow their rule or just don't go in.
And I think, John,
we can do that with other things.
But in public, I think it's a different story. If I'm running down a trail or doing like walking down the street and I don't have a mask on, well, that's my choice. I'm in public. That's the kind of thing that I think there's a balance there.
Here's the other thing too, John. And just being realistic about this whole thing. I'm pulling up a link that you just sent me, but being realistic about this whole thing, I mean, for those of us that have kids and things like that, Colton had his birthday yesterday. He got to go to one of the jumpy places. He got to spend some time with his friends. One of the kids showed up. They were essentially the only two kids in this entire jumpy place thing. And he got to have a birthday party. I'm going to get my haircut tomorrow. I mean, Lauren's been playing softball. We're not hugging all up on each other. The kids aren't walking through lines. My barber requires that you wear a mask. I carry hand sanitizer the best I can. I mean, life must go on to some extent. In that same vein, one of our team members, and I'm not going to say a name, but an older gentleman who is her grandfather actually has COVID, and he has a slew of underlying conditions, John. I mean, he's on dialysis. He's diabetic. He had part of his foot amputated. So when you look at and hear of individuals who they say are being affected the most because of things like this, I'm about to get a firsthand preview of what that actually entails. So if he survives and he's somewhat, symptom free, well, what does that tell us? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very good points there, especially, Mike, about being in public, things like that, and people catching it around, still moving around. Lil John, one of the organization that he's a part of, is they had somebody come down with COVID, and the person is doing well, just slightly elevated temperature, about 99 degrees, some sweat, stuff like that. And so she's doing well, but, they had to go right back onto remote, and for what I don't know how she necessarily got it, but their practices at the facility have been pretty top notch. And that's why we agreed to allow him to go back. Like they making sure that musicians are separated into different rooms and those sort of things. Like, we said it months ago, or it may have been a month and a half or so ago on the episode, is that you're going to have to take personal responsibility on this. And, like you say, with Lauren playing softball and things like that, it's something that we're just going to have to do on our own to make sure that we're safe, because it's clear that we can't trust the rest of the American public, or the community to practice distancing and those sort of things. We're gonna have to do it for ourselves.
I mean, this really is a new world, bro. I mean, I'm watching poker feeds that I normally watch, and they got poker tables divided with, plexiglass walls on the side of each player. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy the kind of stuff that's going on right now as far as it changes. I mean, I'm going to be really curious to see what happens with the school year, because like right now, my kids' school hasn't really decided 100% what's going to happen. They're talking about giving you the option to have your kids stay at home and get school at home, or attend in school schooling. And I'm like, that's crazy that you would just, like, half the kids might come to school and do school at school, and half the kids might do school at home. Like, how does that even work?
So we've got the same thing, John. And I don't know how much you've seen in terms of what your school administrators are doing, but I don't know if you remember Charles Dupree, who was the superintendent out here in Fort Bend County. He held a live feed the other day, and one of the things he suggested was exactly that. The potential blend of half of the students going to school, half of the students being virtual. And then what they would do is they would do a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off type of thing, where you would have like basically teams A and B, and team A would go to school for 2 weeks. That weekend, that there was a change, they'd do a thorough disinfection of the school itself. And then group B would come for 2 weeks and the other kids would stay home. So, one of the things that remains uncertain again is, what's going to happen to things like childcare and things like that. I mean, those are the sectors of the economy that are real sectors and do exist. And childcare, I would imagine, is probably having it pretty tough, because that they already have to carry a pretty significant insurance policy. I'm pretty sure with the amount of kids that are there, and if something were to happen, things like choking hazards and et cetera are all very real possibilities. So, it's
shoot, outside of that, I mean, how many parents can even afford to stay home while their kids go to school during the regular year? I mean, everybody kind of understands that the summer is like, okay, yeah, my kid's not in school anymore, so we kind of make, adjustments to our work life to kind of fit that, right? Because that's been the standard for however many years. But now you're talking about the possibility that during the regular school year, your kid's going to be at home. Like, there's millions of people out there that's going to be like,
so check this out
for a lot of people.
So check this out. I was reading something earlier, and I had to jump off, but this is insane to me, man. Let me read this real quick. This is from People magazine, but it was actually broke by the Washington Post. I just pulled up People because I searched it real quick. But I'm going to read something real quick, and this is crazy. Florida State University has announced that come early August, they will not continue to allow employees to work from home while simultaneously taking care of their children. Quotation, in March 2020, the university communicated a temporary exception to policy, which allowed employers to care for children at home while on the temporary remote work program, read an email. Effective August the 7th, 2020, the university will return to normal policy and will no longer allow employees to care for children while working remotely. So essentially, if I'm not mistaken, what they're basically telling you is that if Chris, John, and Mike all work from home, they're not going to allow you a break or whatever to go take care of your children if you're have a newborn and you have normal feeding times and things like that. What are you going to do?
Oh, man, what you're going to do is you're going to get with all the teachers and threaten to all quit at the same time. Because I mean, it's just
you're going to have
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
They can take that stance all they want, but what you're going to see is the faculty that come together and be like
100%.
Like that. You know what I mean?
But it goes to show, though, that there's already starting to be these rifts from employers who still want to do things in a classical manner, whatever that, entails, definitive wise or definition wise. And then you've got this rift from employees and parents who are saying, what you're telling me is not realistic. And right now, I mean, I don't know what the unemployment numbers are. I think they're still somewhere in the high teen, the low 20 million. You can't just walk out and get another job.
Yeah. And I think so.
Use your hand sanitizer, people.
Even on Zooms, use hand sanitizer.
Mike,
I think it's interesting for those parents. Like, I'm fortunate because I can work from home. My wife being a teacher, we don't know what's going to happen there with Fort Bend and whether or not they're going to, do the online or in class. And I mean, they're talking about a lot of things, a lot of options internally that, I don't know. I don't think they know what they're going to do.
Of course they don't.
They don't know what they're going to do. But for me, so JR has been able to go back to school to the daycare. So to the daycare point, I just said no. Like, we're not sending him back because I don't trust the other parents. Not that I don't trust the daycare. I don't necessarily trust that all the parents are going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of protecting us, really. Not necessarily their kids. They may be safe and they may be asymptomatic or whatever, but protecting us. So the daycare, though, is interesting because, and we still pay for it, it's half rate. But I mean, if you imagine that in March, they pretty much lost everything, like business wise. Some people just said, take my kids out. Some people were like, well, we'll stay in and do some of the stuff at home, kind of remote in a sense. And that's half rate. So at a minimum, take your monthly income as a business and divide by 2, but you still have rent. The teachers are still doing things. And so your expenses haven't gone away, but your, unless they renegotiated, their salaries, expenses didn't go away, but their income did. And so, yeah, man, it's tough, and we don't know what's going to happen in August.
Tell you what, who's probably going to make a killing out of this is going to be nannies.
That's a fair point. it would
So
be a good time for a nanny business. Come in, make
Right.
sure you're clean, square it away, scrub down, all that, follow these procedures, and then take care of kids. Because I can tell you, like, I'm not comfortable at all sending JR to school.
I agree, man.
Not as comfortable sending little John, even though he's older. And actually, man, Alex, she just told me, what did she say? So she was talking about, was it TSU, I believe, is working on a policy now of being able to stay on campus. And if you're on campus, you have to wear a mask.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you will get unenrolled. And then if you stay remote, then there's a fee for the remote side of it, which was like, okay, so pay for
But
being remote or forced to wear a mask everywhere on campus except for your own dorm. Um, and so I don't know, the colleges don't know what they're gonna do. The elementary, high school, they definitely don't know. So
everybody's winging it, bro. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Everybody's
new
winging
world.
it. The new world, bro. I'm winging it. You know?
But you know what,
Just gotta
man?
throw shit on the wall, see what sticks.
You know what? I mean, we have to figure out how to function in it, and throwing our hands up in the air and not doing anything or being thoroughly negative about it isn't going to help.
It's not going to solve any problems.
It's not going to solve any problems.
Right.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, we all still have to function. We all still have to move forward in a positive manner, whatever that means. You know, and we all have to, I mean, this is, you know, the time that this quote unquote American ingenuity that we have heard about for so long, this is the time when we put that to the test. And right now we're so fractionated and polarized from this left-right paradigm.
Shitty leadership, brother. That will kill things.
And Mike's exactly right. You know, I don't know how anyone could look at the leadership on either side of the political aisle and say, man, these guys really have it down. This is exactly who I want to follow. You know what I mean? And that is
exactly.
And you know, John, that is, I don't know if you want to speak to a little bit, but you might, you know, myself, Mike, and you were all on WhatsApp the other day, and we were having a conversation in regards to the new logo that we were going to put up. And you know, I don't know if you want to give folks a sneak preview of it if it's not already up on the site yet, but display it across real quick, man, and it goes kind of right along lines of exactly what we're talking about right now. You know, Mike came up with the biggest part of the you know, slogan revision, and I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll pull it up real quick. You know, and it's just one of those things of whenever we're looking at how we actually operate and what our mission is. You know, I think it was just something that it was overdue. It was something that we needed to kind of help define, because people don't understand the concept of being politically free. And they think politically free means that you don't have an opinion on, you know, one way or another in terms of, you know, a certain situation. So you see it, whatever, Russiagate. If you agree with the right, it's like, well, you're, you know, a righty. Yeah, but then on this other issue, you agree with the left, you know, so where are you? And it's all about thinking outside of this right-left paradigm. And so what we were working on was getting this design together so that we can, we have some prints coming and things like that. And, you know, it just kind of defines it as politically free is to think outside the conventional right versus left paradigm. And
you know, in that same vein, John, I mean, I think what you've seen with a lot of the protesting, with a lot of the, you know, one issue voters and things like that, I think individuals are starting to move that manner and not even realize it. I think they realize that something is wrong. I think they realize that they want another choice, and the only reason why they're sticking with their current choice is because they turned them into one issue voters and forced them one way or the other.
So I was telling my mom the other day, I was having this conversation with her and my older brother. I know, right? My brother's quite the liberal. So So he was, I was basically making the argument that, that we've been making on this show is like, you're kind of screwed either way you go.
Yeah.
You want to pick the left, you're going to be screwed. You want to pick the right, you're going to be screwed. And he's like, well, then who are you going to vote for? And I'm like, I'm not going to vote for any of these clowns. I was like, and I was telling my mom, I was like, imagine if 90% of the country didn't vote. What kind of message would that send to both Democrats and Republicans that 90% of the country didn't like either option and said, fuck you? Those parties would be dead overnight. Overnight, both parties would be dead if everybody used their vote and didn't vote and said, both of these options suck. They're like, neither option is going to take us anywhere where we actually need to go. And that would be a much more powerful message than simply saying, well, one evil is a little less evil. Yeah. So I'm just go ahead and flip the coin and hopefully it works out. You know what I mean?
And again, man, I'll make the argument too that, seeing, I don't even know if it's an argument. It's just more of a discussion. Seeing the diversity and what's going on right now in the streets with all of the protesting and things like that. You take that and you look at the individuals that are trying to move the needle for social change. You look at what the right is offering up in someone like Donald Trump, and then you look at the only way Democrats can counteract that is to run someone like Joe Biden. I mean, it's a terrible choice between the two of them, and it makes it even worse that one candidate's strongest political, position right now is to basically just be quiet and to say as little as possible.
And that's the advice he's getting. I guarantee you, they're like, hey, just don't talk now.
Just chill out.
Just chill. Just don't talk, because if you do talk, you're gonna sink your own ship. And all you really need to do at this point is not talk, because Trump's ship is sinking so bad right now because of the economy.
Bro, do you realize how insane that is? Like, just sit down and be quiet. Don't say anything. I mean, good Lord, man.
That's because he's old and senile, man. Everybody sees it. I mean, who knows what's gonna come out of his mouth? His own people don't even know what's gonna come out of his mouth.
So I was trying to find. I don't remember what video. I don't remember who it was that I was watching. I'm pretty sure. Matter of fact, I know it was on Joe Rogan, and it was Lawrence Lezick. I'll actually put a link to this in the show notes. I just ran across this last night, and I was like, let me check it out. I was just on a Joe Rogan binge, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
He started talking about, now he's on the left, but he was talking about like how to fix this thing, and he was basically talking about like the Electoral College and the arguments for removing it, and how strong it is, that sort of thing. And so what he was saying was that we don't need to necessarily remove the Electoral College. What we need to move away from is you get all of the electoral votes for a state if you get the majority of the votes. And he said the problem with that is essentially all you need to do is just, if it's a red state, a Democrat, like strongly, staunchly red, a Democrat may not go there, right? Because why?
Yep.
Like they just concede and they're like, whatever. I mean, that's not going to count for me. So move on, spend my time places where it's going to count. And he said, if you make it to where you get the portion of it, so if you get 42% of the vote, then you get 42% of the delegates. And he said, what that means now is that now politicians have to go to these states, right? Because now you have to impress a portion of that state to get a portion of the vote. And I thought that was kind of interesting along those lines.
It'll help third parties too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But that's one thing they don't want to happen.
I
Exactly.
I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but the younger the political candidates begin to get, and the more, I don't know if you could say radical, because you look at candidates like, Ilhan Omar, you look at AOC, and then on the other side, you look at some of the QAnon candidates that have won primaries recently by aligning themselves with QAnon and things like, Second Amendment gun rights. I think at some point, and it may be 20 years from now, but I think it's going to come. What it's going to end up happening is individuals are going to get sick and fed up. The older voting demographic that traditionally has controlled the left-right paradigm, is starting to wane. They're starting to die off. At some point, they're going to be obsolete. I think we're going to have a real chance at a third party at some point, just because the powers to be that have controlled it are just going to obsolete themselves out.
Yeah, but here's the danger with that. The danger is that people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, they're tapping into a certain level of anger. That underlies like all of the stuff that's going on in the country right now. And the danger in that is that people are going to be voting based off their emotions instead of what needs to actually happen.
Yeah.
And so you elect candidates like that are tapping into that emotion, that anger, and they start passing things based off of anger and emotion. And you're not going to get things that are actually beneficial to you in the long run. You're going to get stuff that's actually going to be worse for you in the long run. And that's
what's
something
the
we
difference
should
between
work
that
on.
now? I mean, let me throw this at you. Is that one? That's what Trump did. He based it on like, hey, you're going to lose your position. Be afraid of this. Be afraid of this. And it basically he brought up that anger aspect of it, right? And then on top of that, you have policies that he's passing that are based on those same sort of emotions.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what happens is, if you notice, every election now is what's the word that they use? I don't know. Basically, it's critical. It's a critical election. Like, so many things are at stake here. Like, we have to, come through. You got to vote blue no matter who. And I think that's largely we're doing that right now already.
But my point was more along the lines of the youth aspect, like because when you're younger, you think you think much more, or you don't have as much control over your emotions. You know what I mean? Like, you have to. So the young people taking over and the generation that's essentially I mean, let's be real. Like, if you're 18 to like 25 right now, like, your whole future is basically screwed. Like, the way this country is going, like, your whole future is screwed. There's gonna be a shit ton of anger that's out there for that demographic. And I mean, really, you could even argue that if you're 12 or even like, our kids' age, like, your future is already screwed. I mean, you're going $30 trillion in the debt.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. Like, they've already stolen that future from these young kids. And what I'm saying is, these young kids are going to be voting age, out there, like, trying to change things, like younger candidates being elected, and they're going to be voting based off of their emotions and their anger because their futures are already stolen.
Yeah.
And that's a danger as far as what, people are going to actually try and pass without thinking it through. You know what I mean? So
100%.
I got you there. I can definitely understand that. I do think it's important for us to definitely open up this quite a bit. And I think in order to do that, like I said, we've said this before, but, if I was ever running for, the presidency, I'd be like, I'm a one-term president. And I'm just coming in here to wreck shop. We need that dude or woman, whatever. We need that person to come in and be like, look, I don't care if you vote me back in. I need to tear some stuff up in order to fix some stuff. And I think until we have that, they're just going to continue to do this whole flip-flop thing every 4 years, 8 years.
The only way you're going to get, the only way to really do it is whoever decides they want to, like, if you're a legit presidential candidate in my mind, right? If you're legit, you're going to announce that you're going to run for president, and you're going to come out with, like, I don't know, your top 10 structural changes. I'm talking about structural changes. The kind of stuff that if you really get it passed, completely like unseats and changes the way the whole system like works, like those top 10 structural things. And that's what you run your campaign on. And not only do you run your campaign on that, you get the kind of subject matter experts and people who are outside the mainstream that know what they're talking about, and you lead a national conversation a whole year that you're running for president, right? And you get the population behind you to make those structural changes because A, they have to understand that if you do what you say you're going to do, their lives are going to get completely and drastically change. The whole country is going to completely and drastically change.
Yeah.
And so they have to buy into that before you get elected, knowing that when you do get elected, you're going to make those changes and their lives are going to change. And so they understand what they're voting for. So they've already gone through the process of listening why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, and who you're going to have like helping you make the change happen, right? And until somebody like that comes around, I mean, I just don't see how anybody that is singing this song and dance is going to be credible. You know what I mean?
You know that
it's the Rock and Jocko Willink. That's what Joe Rogan said. We need the Rock and Jocko Willink. But
Hey,
Jocko did make that point though, real quick, Chris, and I'll let you jump in. Jocko would make that point that whenever we're dealing with something like it, because of the right-left paradigm, he said something like, let's just take the protests, and people are protesting over police brutality. And instead of being like, well, I'm on the right, so I can't agree with you, I need to fight back against you. Instead of doing that, actually go there, sit down. It's like, hey, you're having an issue with the police force. What's the problem? Let's talk about, let's work on a solution, as opposed to just saying, nope, cops are amazing, we need to support them, Blue Lives Matter. Actually sit down, have a conversation, and actually work on real change, as opposed to just what fits my narrative based on the party that I've chosen to represent.
Well, I mean, one of the best suggestions that Mike ever made on the show was exactly that, in terms of what we need to do is we need to go back to having real conversations nationally on television that are televised. And
live stream that stuff. We got the internet. We don't even need to.
Yeah, exactly. Live stream it.
It's too easy to do it now.
And have real professionals that come on there that are willing to,
people like Patrick Bet-David or Dave Rubin, like those kind of caliber people, like helping lead the conversation. Jordan Peterson, like Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein. Like there's a bunch of people out there that you don't see on mainstream TV that are out there like talking about some real stuff. You know what I mean? And they would be the ones that you would kind of want to like, bring into the conversation to kind of lead the conversation for people to actually listen to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the thing is, like I said before, you got to be ready to deal with what you're asking for, because to do it, essentially the next legit president of the United States will campaign on the idea of overseeing the bankruptcy of the United States.
Yeah.
That is the next legitimate president, is the one who comes out and says, I would like to preside over the bankruptcy of the United States.
And maybe that's the one-term president that we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because it's not re-electable, right? Like, how do you as a party say, hey,
I mean, it is, if you know what you're doing, right?
It is outside of the emotion. If you're not dealing with emotion, it is, right? Because they'll spend, they're going to spend that. If Trump did that right now, or in the next term, or whoever, if Biden did it, the opposite side is going to say he bankrupted the nation. And
that's why I don't think it couldn't come from one of the two parties. Like, there's just no way, because they've already divided the country enough. Yeah, they've already divided the country enough to where, like, if you're a Republican, if you come out as with an R behind your name, whether you got a legit message or not, you already got half the country that's not going to listen to you. Yeah. Same with a D behind your name. You know what I mean?
You think so? And I know we're going to get to a clip here in a sec, but do you think we could ever, in the next few elections, see an independent president? Do you think that's even possible?
Yeah, 100%. You just gotta know. You gotta have the right strategy, brother. Like, you just gotta know. You gotta start at the right spot.
We keep growing our podcast, and maybe one of us.
So, Chris, that's what I was gonna say. I think we can start getting some T-shirts. Mike 2024.
No.
I'm not even put a name on the end. Just Mike 20.
I'm not the presidential type, but I got some names on the list that I would for sure like to be the Doug Stamper of presidents.
He said the Doug Stamper. If you don't know that reference, go to Netflix.
If not, I'll railroad it.
except not as creepy.
But
Right. Yeah, not as creepy. Yeah, that is hilarious.
but there's hey,
Go ahead.
there's so many things going on in the background right now too, man. I mean, I was looking at something earlier, and I didn't get a chance to really dig into it, but I sent it to my personal cell phone because I was in the middle of kind of nowhere. But NPR had a deal, and I it's just something to pay attention to. Jules and I were talking about it earlier, John, and it's kind of where I wanted to have this conversation, which is why I asked you to call me. But have you heard of the what is it, Stop Hate, or the Stop Hate campaign?
It sounds familiar. I'm not
It's
sure.
a nonprofit that launched a few weeks back.
Stop hate.
Yeah, and initially what they were trying to do was they had the goal in mind, and I may have some of the basis of it wrong, but this is the premise. They were essentially wanting to get advertisers to begin to pull their advertisements off of social media campaign sites like Facebook. So There you go, right there. Okay, so Jules and I were talking, and she's like, she said, that's good and all. She said, but I was looking at this to try to figure out, because Shaun King came up. She and I were talking about Shaun King. And one of the things that's so hard to figure out is all of these individuals are taking in donations to fund whatever it is that they're trying to fund, but no one knows where a lot of that money is going to.
This is a rabbit hole.
Okay, now I'm
with
just
Shaun King. Yeah.
Look, we're gonna do a whole episode on this because I want to do a whole episode on this because I think it deserves an episode right now. But essentially, as of today, over 400 advertisers that are worth about $70 billion have hit the pause on Facebook right now. And Rashad Robinson said, who essentially is the leader of the Stop Hate campaign, essentially said Facebook has given advertisers no other option because of their failure time and time again to address the very real and very visible problems on their platform. Robinson said, civil rights group Change of Color, I think is another one. So yeah, they're the coalition that's behind the Stop Hate for Profit campaign.
So you think Facebook stock is going to take a little bit of a dump?
So I don't know. What's it doing right now?
I guess not. I mean, the Fed's going to backstop companies like Facebook anyway.
So it's caught Zuckerberg's attention, and he's actually agreed to meet with the group.
So I think this is, I shared a link, and I'll put this on a video real quick. Let me share this article. This is the one I shared from the other day from 629. And
yeah, there you go.
I mean, they lost $60 billion in 2 days. And so this is, I think, a fascinating movement in the sense that this is kind of what I don't know if you want to call it part of the outrage culture of what happens with Fox News hosts when something's going on and they're like, hey, shame the advertisers to removing ads, from Tucker Carlson or whoever. And that's what in order to get people off air, they target the advertisers. And so if people cannot attract advertisers for their show, whatever the show may be, that makes them change. And this is actually a historical thing in the sense of we've seen this before.
I think that might have been John's audio that cut out.
Still hear you guys? We still good?
Yeah.
And so, we've seen that before. Basically that it's happened. We know that if you pull the money from the advertiser money, then that's going to cause some change. I mean, think about that. Facebook was 60 billion in 2 days. I mean,
but
at some point you gotta.
Their stock's up almost 5%.
I mean, I agree with you. Like it's.
Well,
they're not losing any money. I mean, they may be losing money, but their stock's going up.
But I guess
I think if you let that happen long enough,
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
this,
Well,
that
yeah.
was 2 days, right? Like, and so people may be like, let me wait and hold. But imagine if that now becomes 120 billion, and now they start operating closer to the red, and projections they miss at their next earnings statement. Like it could be some issues for them. They could for sure have some issues with that. But it's stophateforprofit.org. For those of you that are listening, the link will be in the show notes as well.
But the again, it's just something to pay attention to, and before people start donating to all this stuff, I mean, just make sure that you understand where your money is going. One of the other things that Julie and I were having a conversation about earlier is, so Jules and I sit in the office, and what we'll do is we'll share articles with each other about leadership, right? She and I are fortunate to both have good jobs within the oil and gas industry, and we share an office together right now. But what it does is, it's everybody thinks that they want to work from home, but it's a hard thing to do. It really is. So, in saying that, when you're working with a significant other who is on the phone all day long, from the time she wakes up till on Mondays 8-9 o'clock at night, because she has the Singapore calls, it's one of the things that is just kind of mandatory. Well, she and I were sitting here talking today, and we were just having the conversations about a lot of these things. There's two individuals, John. I don't know if you've ever met them before, but Carmen Hackett is a really, really good friend of ours. She lives down in Victoria. And then Mary Hackett, who is deceased, but was her mother, used to dive in deep for these quote unquote nonprofits. And she would pull everything from how much the board of directors of these places were making, where their funds were going. And if she didn't believe that they were living up to their mission statements, she would call them and just absolutely annihilate them. So do your homework.
Donate money, yeah. Do your homework. I mean, coming from somebody who helped run a nonprofit for 5 years, like if you can't see some statements somewhere, like they should be posting. Nonprofits should be posting their numbers somewhere. You should be able to pull. That should be public info. Do your homework. See where your money's going, because there are plenty of places out there that spend that money on things that you
Definitely.
wouldn't agree with. Yeah,
Definitely. And to that extent, before we transition here, with the Shaun King thing, I think we definitely, like, there's a lot to unpack there. I had a friend on Facebook, ended up unfriending, but at the time we were still connected. He was donating to some charity that was, tied to Jay Sekulow. And I just did like some little sniffing, because I was like, I've never heard of this thing. Looked at it. Jay Sekulow, who was Trump's attorney, actually has a nonprofit, and the majority of the profits all go towards him, his brother, his nephew, and stuff like this. And it's like, yeah, if you just do a little bit of snooping, you can see this may not be the organization that you want to donate to.
Absolutely. They're slush funds.
Yeah, man, they definitely can turn into that. And Shaun King is like, there's a myriad of information about him. And so just be careful with who you're giving your money to. And if it's for a cause, if somebody needs funeral costs or something like that, find out who's running the GoFundMe. Don't just jump on that. So
hey, go ahead and pivot, John. Before we do that, rest in peace to Vanessa Guillen. It seems like they found her body yesterday. Out by Fort Hood. One of the individuals who was suspected in her death, her kidnapping, and probably her death, was pulled over by police and shot himself. I believe it was this morning. So, I'm pretty sure we'll see more of that unfold, but just something that I thought needed to be brought up, and that was very relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Mike, you want to lead us on what's going on here with with brother Putin? So we have vote on amendments isn't about Putin. It's the first ever truly Russian constitution, says a lead historian. So this was an interesting thing that here's one of the quotes that we'll pull out real quick. Putin wants to be a czar for life. That makes headlines. Everybody understands that. And if you go into the details of constitutional law, people get bored, right? So it gets boring to dig into the bottom of it. But this is an interesting topic in the sense of we've heard everything that Putin wants to extend his terms and things like that, but there's a little something deeper there. Go ahead and take us away on this, Mike, and we can play this video if you would like to start there.
Yeah, why don't you play the video and then we can talk a little more about it.
All right, cool.
Let's bring in Russia analyst and author Martin McCauley, always a welcome guest on this program. Hi there, nice to see you. So, yeah, it goes without any surprise at all that the focus was on what the foreign media is seeing as Vladimir Putin maybe wanted to shoe on himself in for another 2 terms after this. He hasn't said either which way. But why aren't they focusing either on the other, many other issues here? The social measures are getting much of a mention, or attempts to ensure a more transparent government system, for instance. They don't seem interested in that bit of it.
Yeah, those are mentioned in some of the more serious papers, but if you are in the popular press, you hit the obvious one. Putin wants to be Tsar for life, and that makes headlines. Everyone understands that. But if you go into the details of constitutional law, people get bored. So therefore, they don't want to know about that. The average person doesn't want to know about that. But if you look at these changes, apparently there's over 200 they're voting on. It's the first essentially native or unique Russian constitution, because if you go back to the first constitution of 1906, which the Duma passed, it looked towards the West, especially France, for inspiration. If you look at the Soviet constitutions, the 1936 one of Stalin, parts of it could have been read by, you could read it as a Western constitution. You look at the Yeltsin one, it was heavily influenced by American and French thinking, but this constitution is the first one in Russian history which concentrates thinking about Russia, and this is Russia-centered, and therefore it is a truly Russian constitution.
So if it gets the go-ahead, it'll set Russia on a new course. That's good news for Russia, yeah? What's the rest of the world going to think about that then?
They will see Russia as cutting itself off from the outside world, because one of the important clauses will be that Russian law takes precedence over international law. That means in the future that no international court using international law can actually impose its will on Russia. Russia will say, no, we don't agree with that. Our law, our constitution, in fact, annuls that judgment. And that's a very important statement and a very important move because it places Russia above international law, and the outside world cannot interfere, cannot impose its will on Russia.
What other amendments caught your eye?
Sorry?
What other amendments caught your eye, that aside?
The other one was the fact that a Russian official, to be president, you have to be 25 years, to live 25 years in Russia, which means that in the future, that if there is some chaos about who becomes the next president, no Russian in exile can come back and become president. And also that an official cannot have dual nationality, nor can he have a foreign bank account. But of course, you can get around that by, as they do now, by the foreign bank account being in the name of the wife or another member of the family. But that's important. He may not have foreign residency or foreign citizenship. That means that he's beholden to Russia and cannot, if you like, leave Russia if he finds things difficult.
Okay, well, we'll know what's happening by tomorrow morning early on, I guess.
That's good. So man, there's a lot to unpack there, bro.
Man, it's
a lot to unpack. So if you're listening to that, right, you can take a bunch of stuff away from that. So essentially what Russia is doing, in my opinion, right, because let's remember what the backdrop is right now when it comes to the global economy, the global money standard, or the current global money system when it comes to the dollar and the Fed printing trillions of dollars. I think and the United States basically using the dollar as a weapon against countries like Russia and South American countries, China. and countries like Russia wanting to get away from the dollar, so you can see this as another domino that's falling for Russia to get away from the U.S. or even from any kind of influence, outside influence, whether it be international courts, or the potential of a U.S. backed candidate or campaign coming in and trying to unseat Putin or whoever in the future. So they see the writing on the wall, and they're preparing themselves via their constitutional amendments to make sure that Russia can stand alone out in the world as the world changes right now, right? And as the money system is going to shift and change, as the dollar becomes less relevant, and the Fed prints trillions of dollars and devalues the dollar, and eventually loses its status as a reserve currency. And so this is a step in that direction for them to prepare for that. And so, so as far as Putin, becoming president, for another 6, 8, or what is it, 8? I think in 2000, they changed their constitution, I think in 2008. So now terms, I think, are 8 years. But, for another 1 or 2 terms, honestly, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that from a strategic standpoint. Even from a global standpoint, it makes sense. Because, I was talking to Chris's wife, and we were talking about this, and she's like, she brought up a good point. She's like, sometimes the devil is better than the devil you don't know. And so can you imagine how destabilizing it might be just for the whole world if Putin wasn't the president of Russia? You don't know who that person is going to be. You don't know what their policies are going to be. You don't know how they're going to act. You know what kind of, at least with Putin, you know what you're going to get, right? Like, we know what we're going to get with Putin. So, and so for Russia, it's probably better that he's the president for the next 8 to 16 years as we kind of go through this transition, this huge transition that the world's going through right now, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with, like, that's just, I mean, if that's how they want to do it in Russia, that's fine. That's not how we do it over here. But I'm not going to judge them on that. And I think it makes probably the most strategic sense for their country and honestly for the stability of the world right now for him to be president for the next 8 to 16 years.
Yeah, and I can't, like, I have some Russian coworkers that I work with. I've worked with several Ukrainians as well, and some Germans. So a lot of people in that area. I'm actually going to poll them and kind of just see what they think about these sort of changes. I think it's interesting to kind of get that local perspective. I remember whenever, what's his name? Zelensky in the Ukraine won. I remember hearing all the news, and I asked them what they thought about it. And they were like, he's a comedian. He doesn't know what he's doing, that sort of thing. And, so I think that
they said that about Putin?
No, Zelensky over in the Ukraine.
Gotcha.
So it was just like a different perspective of what we were hearing, in the local states, and just some more details, things that you just don't get from here. So I'm just going to poll them and kind of see. But one thing he said that was interesting to me was the part about, like, he's making sure, or they're making sure, that it is 100% a pro-Russia person. Like, you have to have lived there for not just had
no bank
citizenship.
accounts. You gotta live there. No dual citizenship. Like
25 years.
You're born. You're breeding. You're breeding. Born and bred. Russia, basically. You know what I mean? So,
no outside houses. What?
Right.
What? Like that.
Well, I mean, that's
pretty
the
strict.
thing. They're trying to rule out the possibility of some American-backed puppet who might have left and came back and has a bunch of assets overseas, and maybe they don't really care about what happens with Russia because all their stuff's overseas anyway. So those are all chains. Those are all legitimate, I think, changes that they're making for a very specific reason. So that they don't have to worry about the kind of tomfoolery that we pull in all these other places. Yeah, You know what I'm saying? And this is by no means some sort of endorsement of Putin. It just from a strategic standpoint,
right.
It just probably makes the most sense, right? I don't agree with somebody just coming in and saying we're going to change the law so I can be president forever, But at the same time, given the backdrop of everything that's going on, where the direction we're going in, it might be the most stable option at this point. So
Yeah, I do like the idea of no foreign bank accounts, though. I think that's something we should adopt. Like, you can't have any foreign bank account. You want to be president, I want you to have no ties outside of this country, especially monetarily. Houses, okay, I don't know. I don't know about that one, but in terms of money being elsewhere, it's like, I don't know about that.
I'm sure they'll find ways around that somehow.
Well, he said that. He was like, you put it in the wife's name, put it in the kid's name,
Right. Yeah. I'm sure there's nobody listening to this is probably think they got to be thinking themselves. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to abide by that. Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I think probably forced disclosure. Like, you're running for president, you have to release your tax returns. None of this.
Yeah, you're gonna have to hide it. You're gonna have to hide it real good if you're gonna hide it.
You, your spouse, your kids, all immediate family, release your tax returns because, hey, we don't even release them. We got them. Like,
well, hey, you could just have your assets in Bitcoin and
look at that transition.
You like that? Like that? That's how you pivot.
Yep. Let's actually take this to the post show. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have the post show on the YouTube channel. So visit politicalfreeagents.com and you can go to the YouTube channel from there. And this is where we're going to start having just a little bit more of the conversation, and kind of move some of it in that direction. So, you can catch us live. You can see our beautiful faces on camera, but we're going to continue on the post on YouTube. You can also find it afterwards on politicalfreeagents.com. For those of our audio listeners, make sure you subscribe and like to the YouTube channel. And also, you can find us anywhere on any podcast service. We're on Spotify, Apple, and Google Play. Hit us up on social media at PFA Podcast, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, the politicalfreeagents.com. We are the Political Free Agents, and we'll see you in the post show. All right, the Bitcoin aspect. We are clear from audio. So we are just on YouTube now. The Bitcoin aspect of all this, Mike. I think we're going to have a Bitcoin expert also coming on next Wednesday, which I think is going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to have that discussion. We're going to have Michelle Renee on. And, I definitely want to talk about like some blockchain specific, not necessarily just Bitcoin, how blockchain could impact different things. But from the Bitcoin perspective, we talk about it a lot. We are all invested in a certain way into this space. What are your thoughts in terms of how these sort of things are impacted and how Bitcoin is moving right now?
Oh, I think Bitcoin is full steam ahead right now. I mean, you're seeing the network effect happen in Bitcoin just with certain people connecting with each other to have a conversation, explain what it is, expose more people to the idea of it, and eventually price will follow. So Max Kaiser was just on Patrick Bet-David's Valuetainment show. Now, if you watch Patrick Bet-David's Valuetainment podcast or show, you understand the kind of influence and reach that he has into all areas of life, sports, entertainment. Guy interviews, mobsters, people in the economy, and like I was telling you in the pre-show, if I had to make a list of some of basically the top interviewers, in this country, Patrick Bet-David would be like top of the list, easy on the top of the list. So, the network that he has, the people, the following he has, for him to interview somebody like Max Kaiser, who's basically, you know, in my opinion, Bitcoin Yoda, and you know, exposes so many more people to the idea of Bitcoin and why it exists, what it is, how it's going to shape the world, the financial world, the digital world. And so, you know, as this Bitcoin evolution and revolution like continues, like these networks effects of people talking to people, it's going to speed up the process, especially now with like we've been talking about, like the Fed coming in and, you know, just that's all they can do is print money, and they're printing debt at the same time. So the system is just continually like increasingly falling apart. And so these kind of connections, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, it's just real positive for it. You know what I mean? Like I've been waiting years. I've been waiting years of watching Patrick Bet-David and Max Keiser, thinking to myself, when are these two going to talk? You know, like one of these two. When's Patrick Bet-David going to have Max on? You know what I mean? And sure enough, it happened. You know, so.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people don't understand in terms of when we say, you know, or they hear like you're printing debt, and people are not necessarily understanding. I think a good analogy to that would be you're behind and, you know, overextended on your credit cards, and you're using another credit card to pay off a credit card, which means you have another credit card that you need to pay off now, and now you're overextended on that one. So you just get another credit card, and basically the entire time you're just stacking credit cards on top of credit cards.
And the key is that that's how you have to do it. There's no other option.
And
that's the way the
no
system
other
works.
way.
That's the way the system works. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And once you figure that out, that's when the system falls apart. You know, that's when you lose that confidence. And so, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. You know, what's really, you know, Max talked about this in the video, but what's gonna be really interesting
in the show notes too.
Yeah, and I mean, what's gonna be really interesting is the progression of countries adopting Bitcoin and fighting for that hash rate and the mining. So as more country, and that's just another form of kind of getting outside of this dollar system that we've been in for so long. So, you know, it's just going to be, and we've been talking about this for years, but now with COVID and everything kind of falling apart, and kind of like pulling the curtain back and seeing essentially what their only options are is to bail out a bunch of rich people, put everybody into debt, and print a bunch of money. It's gonna speed up the process in my opinion. So it's gonna be great to get people like Michelle on to kind of talk about how you know, how the Bitcoin and financial education can affect certain communities in a positive way, because you're kind of taking back control over you know, over your time and your money and your wealth and basically you're basically taking back control over your life essentially in a lot of ways. So it's gonna be great to make those connections. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because I know I've seen a couple things from her now where she was talking about how Bitcoin could impact the Black community, and you know, as you know, I'm digging into Bitcoin and Black America, the book by Isaiah Jackson, which, by the way, I was wondering why I got here a little slow, but he actually signed it, which I thought was actually a pretty cool little lanyard there. But I think it was important discussion, because historically that's been one of the problems with the Black community with banking, and there's a trope inside of the Black community that Black folk don't trust banks, and that comes from banks actually literally stealing Black people's money, you know, to the tunes of millions of dollars. I believe it was in the 20s or 30s. And so Bitcoin in and of itself is unconfiscatable, and I think that's one of the big things that people could really realize, is that money that you put in there, like I have cold storage sitting over here in my desk drawer that's just holding crypto. It's just sitting there holding crypto. Nobody can touch it. You know, it's like basically putting cash under your mattress. But even
Don, number one rule of security is you don't tell people where you keep your stuff.
Yeah, that's actually my raggedy one. My other one is actually locked up. You can't get to
All
that.
right.
But even if you
get bright ideas over here.
Yeah. Even if you do,
you
you don't have the keys to unlock it. So, and I mean the digital key, not the real one. But I think that's, it's funny because actually last night, man, I was like, oh man, I needed to move some money from one of our banks to another one. And I needed to actually physically go to the bank. And I was like, the reason I have to do this is otherwise it's going to take a day or two for that money to go through the system and get to the other bank. And I just remember writing, thinking, if this was Bitcoin, I would have been done. And it would just been there in 12 minutes, 15 minutes stopped, and so I look forward to when this expands some. And I'm interested to see if it ever gets to the point of being used for daily transaction type stuff. I know we've
It
seen
will.
some people do that, but I know like Microsoft did it and they ended up stopping because it was too volatile. Like by the time you checked out and they processed, it was worth less or worth more, sort of thing.
This is where people like Roger Ver don't think ahead enough. Like right now, we're still in the Bitcoin accumulation phase, where the value still has to be determined by enough people wanting it and acquiring it for the price to stabilize, right? And we still have to go through the dollar collapse, get through the other side. Like there's all sorts of stuff that we have to go through before we get to the end state, which is enough people have acquired it, right? Right? Enough people have acquired it to where, there's not 5 billion people out there that don't have it yet, right? There's only however many million. Like I think there's less than 100 million people that own Bitcoin, I think. So out of a population of like 6 billion. So that Bitcoin has to get spread out enough, which increases the price dramatically. But once you do that,
Right.
the price stabilizes, right? And we're still in the early phase of accumulation of the world kind of figuring out what it is and how it's going to work and how that's going to play into the current system falling apart and going through and getting to the other side. So, but like people like Michelle and Max educating people on that is important.
Yeah, I think so too, man. I mean, I'm looking forward to it for sure. That's why I'm still mining. Keep the miners running, man. But I'm definitely looking forward to that. So that episode for all those listeners is going to be next Wednesday, 7 p.m. You don't want to miss that one. That's going to be a pretty phenomenal episode. So I'm looking forward to that one. But Mike, it's been great, brother. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the stream here and get some dinner going.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, my man.